Good afternoon, students. Today we are going to start our first chapter of geography, that is resources and development. In this chapter we will come to know about what are resources, classification of resources, resources development and their planning, conservation of resources, land resource and its utilization, land degradation and conservation of land, soil and the types of soil, and finally we will come to know about soil erosion and what can be the steps to eradicate this problem, soil erosion. So we will start with resources. What are these resources? So we will come to know that the things which are present in our environment and we use them in our daily life to fulfill our needs, to satisfy our needs, are called resources. These resources can be into two ways in our environment: natural resource and man-made resource. The resources which are present naturally in our environment, we do not do any kind of effort to create them or to produce them, are called natural resource. Whereas the resources which are made by the effort of human beings, these resources are called man-made resource. But students, this is very important to know that there are few things which are very essential to use these resources in a very proper way. What are these things? These things are human resource, technology and institutions. Human resource we discussed in our previous syllabus also, but here also I shall like to discuss again. Human resource refers to the skill, talent, ability and knowledge of human beings to use these resources in a proper way, balanced way, along with the use of technology. Here we should understand nicely that without use of technology, human beings can also not be able to use these resources properly. And then institutions come. Institutions refer to factories, industries and so many other organizations which work to use these resources. So finally we can say there is a very good correlationship among all these things: resources, human beings, technology and institutions. The combination of all these things is important to use these resources in a proper way. Now second is classification of resources. There are different bases on which we can classify these resources. First is on the basis of origin. On the basis of origin. Here we classify these resources into two ways: biotic and abiotic. Biotic resources are those resources which are belonging to biosphere, means which have life. And examples for biotic resources are human beings, animals, plants, forests and so many other things. And just opposite of that we have abiotic resource. Abiotic resources are those resources which do not have life. These are non-living things like minerals, metals, rocks, so many other things. Now second comes on the basis of exhaustibility. Means if we use these resources, how impact can be there on the quantity of these resources. Again, on the basis of exhaustibility, we can classify our resources into two ways. Renewable and non-renewable. Renewable resources are those resources which are present in our environment and we use them continuously. But there is no impact on the quantity of these resources. We should say there is no negative impact on the quantity of these resources. Very easily, the quantity of these resources can be recovered. For example, solar energy, wind energy, water resource, trees, plants, and so many other things. And non-renewable resources are those resources which we use, but it's not possible that the quantity of these resources can be recovered rapidly. It takes thousands of years to be recovered. Now, third is on the basis of ownership. On the basis of ownership, we can classify our resources into four ways. First, individual resources. Individual resources are those resources which have their individual owners. All the people cannot be allowed to use these resources equally. Only owners of few people can have the permission, we can say, to use these resources or can have right to use these resources. For example, factories, industries, individual ponds, wells in the villages. Now, second is community resource. Second is community resources. Community resources are those resources which can be used by plenty of people or group of people at a time equally. For example, public parks, public gardens, cinema halls, public wells or ponds in the villages. Now, next is natural resources. Natural resources are also similar to community resources because under this resource, all the people of the nation or country are free to use these resources equally. There is no discrimination with anyone to use these resources. All are free equally to use these resources. For example, railway facility, roadways facility, rest of the modes of transportation can be used by all the people equally. Now, last is international resources. Again, here we have to include those resources which can be used by the people of all the countries. These resources are those resources which are not for an individual country. These resources can be used by the people of different countries equally. freely. Now, last comes on the basis of status of development. Again, we have to classify these resources into 4 ways. First, potential resources. Potential resources are those resources which are found in different regions, but we do not have the facility of technology to use them. For example, there are very good chances to use solar energy, wind energy in state Rajasthan, but we don't have sufficient and efficient technology to use these resources there. Second comes developed resources. Developed resources are those resources which are present in our environment. We know their quantity and quality, and we are using them nicely to satisfy our needs or to fulfill our requirements. Now, third comes stocks or stock resources. Again, these resources are similar to potential resources. These resources are properly found in our environment, but again we don't have knowledge to use technology to assess these resources or to approach these resources so that we can be able to fulfill our needs. Now, last comes reserves. It means we have sufficient quantity of resources, but still we are not interested to use these resources to fulfill our needs. Why? Because these resources we have reserved for the use in future or for coming up generation. Really, this is our moral responsibility that we should use these resources in such a manner, in such a way, so that we can preserve something for our coming up generation. Now, our next subtopic is resource development or we can say sustainable development. With proper planning. Here we have to discuss all those points which can be helpful to conserve our resources properly. But before that, we have to know the real condition of resources in our country. How we are doing with our resources. Really, students, it's thinkable that we are not using these resources properly. We are not taking care of these resources properly. Continuous use of these resources leads to the problem of depletion of resources. Means the quantity as well as quality of these resources are going to be decreased rapidly. So, for having a control over this problem, the depletion of resources, we should plan in such a way so that we can conserve these resources properly for future generation. What are these points? What are these steps? First is sustainable development of resources. Means we have to use these resources without disturbing nature. We don't have right to disturb our nature for fulfilling our requirements. Because most of the resources we are getting from nature only. So imagine, students, if we disturb nature, what kind of situation or atmosphere can be there in front of us? Really, we can have so many problems. These problems can be in the form of natural disasters, where a lot of destruction can be there. Many people can lose their lives. Many animals can die. Second is, we should have control over our desires. If we will be able to control our desires, so obviously there will be a kind of control over the use of resources. Next, we should not use continuously resources from the same place. New areas, new regions can be surveyed by the people so that there should be a balance to use these resources. Now, next is conservation of resources. Again, it's similar to our this subtopic, resource development, along with sustainable development with proper planning. How can we conserve our resources? Balanced use of resource. Minimum use of resource. Desires or needs should be controlled. New regions for these resources should be surveyed. Now, after this, we will study about land resource, utilization of land, land degradation, and how we can conserve land resource. So, that's all for this session. I hope you understood all these points which I discussed with you. In our new session, we will continue with new contents. Thank you.